If I started by listing someone's positive qualities and then mentioned the negative ones, you would surely consider him a good person. But if I start by describing the negative qualities and then add the positive ones, you'd probably think he's a bad person. To understand why we are susceptible to manipulation and making wrong decisions, let's review the contents of the book Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a German economist and psychologist who was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2002. The beginning of the book introduces the idea of systems 1 and 2. To make it more understandable, let me explain it this way: two entities are described in your mind, identified as System 1 and System 2. System 1 operates automatically, intuitively, effortlessly and without your conscious control. You can think of him as that classmate who talks too much, responds quickly without much thought, and even though he doesn't know too much, he is always ready to engage in any question. On the other hand, System 2 operates in a more leisurely manner, needs concentration, calculation, analysis, and deliberate decision-making. You can think of System 2 as that other classmate who sits in a corner quietly, not very sociable, who doesn't talk much, but who is very intelligent. From an evolutionary perspective, both systems play important roles. For example, without System 1, we would not be able to react automatically to seeing a danger such as a lion. Similarly, without System 2, we would struggle to focus and solve complex problems. Each system has its specific function, but problems arise when we use the wrong system. On many occasions, System 1 tends to predominate over System 2, which leads us to make wrong decisions. This is mainly because System 2 is slower and often reluctant to get up and running to work. After the introduction of Systems 1 and 2, the author discusses various biases that generate discrepancies between these two systems. One of the biases mentioned by Kahneman is known as stimulus. Stimulus implies that exposure to something influences your behavior and subsequent decisions. For example, at the beginning of the video, the first word you heard significantly influenced how you perceived and made decisions about the person. After hearing the first words, you were initially inclined to think positively about that person. As more words were added, your conviction about your decision was reinforced, and the extra words had little impact on your final choice. This phenomenon was also observed in the evaluation of the second person. There is a well-known experiment in a winery where, on certain days, French music was played in the restaurant, which led to customers buying more French wine. On other days, by playing German music, customers opted to buy more German wine. This simple change in music caused a significant alteration in individuals' purchasing behavior. Now let's explore how we can harness the stimulus in our daily routine. For example, when you wake up and observe your surroundings in the room, focusing on the things that bring you well-being and happiness can positively influence the rest of your day. When you find yourself in an interview or meet someone relevant, it's crucial that you focus on your greeting, handshake, and appearance. As you saw in the example above, these first actions are decisive in forming our final opinion. If you have a website and you're marketing a product or service, analyze what are the first two elements that visitors notice and what impression it generates for them. You may not perceive it, but words influence your behavior quickly and almost imperceptibly. The stimulus effect operates on a subconscious level, and its effects are not easily visible. Now, take a moment to reflect. If the simple act of reading rude words can negatively influence your behavior, can you imagine the impact negative thoughts can have? Thoughts are considerably more influential than reading words, as they involve imagination and emotions. Now let's explore loss aversion bias. Suppose I propose to you to participate in a game where I will flip a coin. If you win, you'll get $10,000, but if you lose, you'll have to give me $10,000. You have a 50% chance of winning and a 50% chance of losing. Would you be willing to play? Although the monetary gain and loss are equal, I need to offer a much bigger reward so that you are willing to participate in such a game. The space reserved in our brain for negative emotions is 3 times larger than the space for positive emotions. The negative emotions associated with loss are considerably more intense than the positive emotions related to gain. In short, we experience a deep distaste for losing, leading to a loss aversion bias. Let us examine how we can use this understanding to advantage. For example, when persuading someone to take an action, it's not just about highlighting the potential gains, but also explaining the potential losses they would face. Loss aversion can be a significant obstacle and can restrict our ability to act, especially when starting new ideas or businesses. When we consider the risks, we may experience a sense of paralysis. One way to mitigate the effects of loss aversion is to focus on long-term benefits rather than focusing solely on short-term problems. Sunk cost refers to any past expenses that have already been incurred and cannot be recovered. For example, consider buying a ticket to a concert. On the day of the event, you get sick. Despite your illness, you decide to attend the concert because otherwise you would have lost the money you paid for the ticket. The same principle applies to our businesses or projects. Despite incurring losses, we continue to invest money and effort into the business simply because we have already spent money in the past. Similarly, we persist in an unsatisfactory relationship because of the time and effort we have put into building it. From a logical perspective, what you've invested so far doesn't necessarily determine the future success or failure of your business or relationship. At this point, you might argue that it makes sense to think logically and acknowledge that your past spending doesn't influence your future decisions. Framing bias refers to the way decisions are presented and how they affect our choices. For example, if you feel sick and visit a doctor, after the exam, they inform you that you have a 10% chance of dying. Then, you see another doctor who tells you that you have a 90% chance of survival. From a statistical perspective, both doctors have provided you with the same information. However, you're likely to feel much more worried when you hear that you have a 10% chance of dying. This phenomenon is known as framing. Kahneman states that the way we are presented with options has a huge influence on the decisions we make. Variations in wording, context, and circumstances can have a significant impact on our decision-making processes. The halo effect manifests itself when we perceive that attractive people are smarter, funnier, and nicer than less attractive people. For example, if two women committed the same crime, we are likely to impose a lighter punishment on the one we find more attractive. Although it makes no logical sense, our System 1 is influenced by physical appearance and other irrelevant characteristics that are unrelated to the decision we are making. For example, if an employer finds an applicant attractive or likable, they are likely to also consider them smart, competent, and qualified. So, the next time you select a business partner or take someone's advice, question whether the person actually possesses valuable skills and knowledge, or whether their appearance and other irrelevant aspects. Anchoring occurs when we place a great deal of trust in the first piece of information we receive and then make additional judgments based on it. For example, let's say you're looking to buy a leather jacket and you find one you really like in a store. When you check the price and see that it is $4,000, you immediately think that it is expensive and decide not to buy it. However, when you return it, you realize that you checked the price incorrectly and that the jacket actually costs $2,500. Suddenly, you'll find that the jacket is cheaper because of the initial price you saw, even if that price was wrong. This is known as the anchoring effect. Humans often place a great deal of trust in the first piece of information they receive and then make additional judgments based on it. One way to counteract the anchoring effect is to set a pre-boundary before starting a task. The endowment effect is an emotional bias that suggests that once we acquire something or feel ownership of it, we tend to value it irrationally, regardless of its objective value. This principle underlies car test drives and allowing consumers to interact with products before they buy them. As people spend more time interacting with a product, their sense of ownership increases. This phenomenon is also seen in free trials of software and online services. The more time people invest in using and customizing these products, the greater their sense of ownership and the harder it becomes for them to give them up. Confirmation bias refers to the inclination toward seeking out and accepting evidence that supports our opinions and beliefs, while ignoring those that don't. Humans tend to interpret new information in a way that confirms their previous beliefs and conclusions. In short, we tend to overlook the fact that any issue has multiple facets and concentrate only on those that support our ideas. If you have the will to believe in something, you will find evidence to justify it. It can often be painful to listen to someone with a different perspective, but this can be helpful in spotting potential problems or early warnings. Thank you for watching the video until the end and keep transforming yourself into your best version.